Hey guys, this is Chad Oliver, and we're back this Wednesday morning, November the 3rd, with another Breakfast with the Banner. And we are here live with Jenna and Brian Wainer from Morgan's Funeral Home and Lakeland Funeral Home at Edible. And we're just going to talk to them this morning about what they do, of course, funeral planning and pre-planning and what all goes into it, and just catch up with Jenna and Brian and just let them talk a little bit this morning.
Hi.
I know this is probably new to you guys,
Yeah.
and but of course we started these Breakfast with the Banners close to a year ago, and what we want to do is just help promote Morgan's. Not that it needs any promotion, because you guys, this has been a staple in our community for a long time, and but I know there's a lot of people during this. Of course, death is never a good thing, but it's something we're all going to have to experience, and what goes into planning a funeral, maybe pre-planning, what people would come in with, of course, younger people, questions they might have. So why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about what you guys do and exactly how you serve our community.
Okay. I'll start. Well, when we came here almost 6 years ago, it'll be 6 years in January, my family, it's I think we're the seventh generation. It's funeral business has been in my family for 177 years, I think.
Really?
So I grew up around it, and I actually lived in a funeral home. So I've been around it my whole life, yeah. And but it's totally different growing up around it and actually serving in that business. So when we moved here 6 years ago, and after meeting with Rick, I'll never forget the day we started. It was a busy day, and I think Brian had maybe only ever been to one or two funerals ever in his life, and we just got thrown in there. But Rick has been really wonderful, and all of his staff that had been there for 30 plus years, they were all very wonderful with showing us how the Morgans family had done it. That was very important to Rick when he sold, was that he wanted to be able to pick his the people that took it over, because he wanted to be able to walk them through the way that his family had done it. He was afraid that if anything were to happen to him and it just got sold and he didn't have control of that, that the whole business would change. So when we started, Rick really did a good job of just kind of holding our hand and showing us what he did and what his family did. And I will say, watching him, the main focus of their family was to just be there for families. Someone told us the other day that whenever they went through a passing of one of their family members, they'll never forget Rick went on the call and they were asking him some questions, and Rick's response constantly was, well, we'll take care of that. We'll take care of that. And that was very important to that family, because all they want to hear during that process is that someone's going to handle it for them. So I think it was really important to us when we started that it wasn't about a business. It wasn't about anything else other than serving those people here in the community. And watching him interact with people, he's so good. He knows everybody, and he knows a little bit about somebody, and he always takes the time to go out of his way to talk to people, and he's never better than anyone. So I think a lot of what we have learned has come from just watching him as a person. So I feel like we try to uphold that at Morgan's. It's the most important to us, is just to love our families. They're going through the most difficult day of their life, and they come in, they've been up all night, some have been up for days, they have questions, sometimes they're dealing with family members that they haven't talked to in years, they're grieving, so they come in and they're lost, and to be comforting to them and to let them know that, hey, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it for you, I think is the most important thing for them. And just to be there. A lot of times they just want to talk. They want to tell you the story. They want to open up about everything. And you just have to realize that in that moment, it's not about you. It's about them and about who they've lost. So I think that we've learned a lot from Rick and his staff that he had there, and the Morgans family. So we hope that we're carrying that on.
Well, I know everybody knows Rick, and of course he's been a staple in our community for years, and of course everything you said about him was spot on. The money, and I don't think there's not one person here in Princeton that he doesn't know or hasn't dealt with, and so, I think you guys are doing a really good job with carrying that on.
I appreciate that.
It's of course I know being a family-owned business, with any kind of family-owned business, and you get that reputation with for so many years, and to keep that carrying on, and you guys have done that, and it's still, I hate to say it's the same old Morgans that it used to be, but it's Morgans, and you haven't. It's the same, I guess, business model that it's always been, and you guys have done such a good job with what you guys do. And but I know you said you've been in this, you grew up around this business, and that must have been a unique childhood, I guess.
It was not different for me. I mean, you only know what you know.
Right.
So I grew up every day getting off the bus at the funeral home, and we lived at the funeral home. So I knew no different, just like Pepper knows no different. I mean, she's been there from day one, and Sunny now is running around the funeral home. It's just like any family business. You have friends that own restaurants, and their kids are at the restaurants. They know no different. So you don't know any different until you get into it, and then it is totally different as you're being a funeral director rather than just a child running around it. Right. So it's really neat, though. My family, my grandfather and Rick's father were actually really good friends, and we didn't really realize this until after we'd come here and we found a letter.
Rick brought it to us.
Rick brought it to us.
Just a couple weeks after we came in, and he said, I want you all to see this. I've kept on to it. And it was a letter from her grandfather to Rick's dad, just extending condolences when Rick's mom passed away. And
he couldn't come to the funeral because he said all the girls were in Florida.
So
he had to stay back and work. So it was really neat just to see that we had never met Rick, but it was neat to see that even though he had chosen us, that there actually was a bigger plan. Yeah. And we always talk about that God definitely put us here because we would have never picked Princeton.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong. We had just never been here before.
Right.
So it was kind of neat to see that. It was almost like God had everything planned out beforehand, and we just never knew it. So I think that meant a lot to Rick, and it meant a lot to me, and we still have that letter. So our families have gone back, and through the years, when Rick and his family would run into issues, or my family ran into issues, they would call each other and they'd help each other out. So it's been a long history of family connection, but that really was neat for Brian and I to see that. So
that's really cool that you bring that up. I know how you can look back in the past and how God has had his hands on different aspects, and he kind of brings it full circle. That brings of course, I've been filling in at Pleasant Hill Baptist Church preaching, and we come across, they told us some of the history of Pleasant Hill, and it was my fifth grade grandfather that was the first preacher there back in the late 1890s.
Yeah.
And then
you didn't know that?
Didn't know that.
That's
and
crazy.
Then come to find out my wife, her grandmother, her maiden name was Fitz, and so come to find out her fourth great-grandfather was one of the founding members there. So it was just kind of cool how it just kind of, God brings things full circle. But
we call it the backstitching.
Yeah.
And when we were going through the adoption with Sonny, one of our preachers was telling us, whatever you do, if you think something's ironic, write it down, because at the end you're going to look back and you're going to see where he had backstitched the whole story. And so it is neat to see things like that. You really feel like you're where you're supposed to be when you see those things. So
yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah,
it's really cool. Brian, I know you kind of been quiet this whole time. How did you were you were new to this, right?
Oh yeah, okay. Brand new. Funeral service was not on my radar growing up. Just as far as careers went, never even thought about it. I had lost my grandfather when I was in middle school. So even now I think back and I really don't remember much of any of that process, or at least I don't remember it until I had talked with my mom after coming into this and really realizing what had taken place. And I met Jenna around 2009, I think, and
it's 2008.
2008. I knew I was going to mess that one up. But anyways, she told me about her family's background, and when we got more serious together, she asked me if I'd ever come back to Kentucky, long term with her. And I went to school here at UK, and I was falling pretty hard for her. So of course I said, I'd always keep it an option. And but I really had no idea what it entailed. And it's interesting to me because back in 2015, when this all developed, we both we're really enjoying life in Arizona and in our careers. And when the opportunity presented itself, we kind of had a pretty deep conversation, and we're in a really unique career that is 100% focused on serving families.
Right.
And as much as we enjoyed our previous careers, this is just, I think, a more fulfilling
Right.
Opportunity for us both. And we feel like God had a lot of impact in pushing us in this direction. So it's been pretty awesome to be on this side of things and see what you can do serving a family instead of just
both of our careers before this, like he said, we were very happy in our careers, but I can remember sitting behind a computer for 16 to 18 hours a day and meeting my deadlines, but never feeling like it impacted anyone. And
Right.
I always thought that like God had given me something that I was supposed to help other people, and I think a lot of people feel that way, but it wasn't coming to fruition in my
Right.
career, even though I loved my career. And so when we came back for this opportunity, I don't think him and I realized that side of it, that
Right.
this job, the gratification you get from someone hugging you and saying, oh my gosh, I couldn't have done it without you, or
Right.
seeing somebody in the grocery store a year later and them just look at you and you know exactly what they're thinking. The last time they saw you, you were helping them through a service. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's
Right.
bad, but we never imagined that side of it, because when my parents would talk about it, it was when they're at home talking, it was more about the business side of things,
Right.
not the connections that they make with people. And I'm such a people person that
Right.
those connections are it's the most important thing to
Right.
us.
Right.
And it's pretty neat getting to work with him. It's not always great working with your husband, but I feel like we've gotten to see different sides to each other that we probably
Right.
never would have seen had we kept separate jobs.
Right.
So it's interesting, but I get to see a really great side of him that I don't
Right.
think he probably would have ever had in his other job, and that I may not have ever gotten to see. So, but there are times that I'm like, okay, so you can be that nice to families, bring it home too.
Right.
So
It's kind of funny
It's-
how our wives can break
yeah.
us out of our shell, isn't it? Yeah.
it's like, I saw you at that family today. I know you've got it in you. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting, and I feel very fortunate that we get to do this
Yeah,
together.
Yeah,
So
that's really cool that I know as a husband and wife that you do get to work together like this, and that how you're serving people, and like you said, it is fulfilling when you because not everybody. I think it's so strange because it's not everybody's called to do what you guys are doing, and I know it's got to be a tough business. I know it's got to be, and it's just like of course this month we just had our Veterans Day paper that came out yesterday, and of course not everyone's called to serve in the military or to be a doctor or a nurse, and it takes a special kind of person to do what you guys do.
Well, I feel like I've learned a lot in the past couple of years since we've been here, but if you don't follow God's will, if you follow God's will, there will be a blessing, but if you don't follow God's will, you're going to miss out more than if you had just followed. Even if you're scared or nervous or don't think it's right, always follow through, because the blessings are so much bigger on the other side of it. And I just think, and what's important for us is that everyone loses someone. You can't get around that. And no one family is better than another family.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you have. Every single person deserves a dignified goodbye.
Right.
Every person means something to someone. Doesn't matter what street you live on. Everyone deserves that. And so I think it's really important in our funeral home to treat everybody the same.
Right.
You have to have a level of empathy when you do this job, and empathy is putting yourself in those person's shoes and walking through it with them. And I hope that we do that. I hope that we treat everybody the same. But people ask us all the time, well, how do you do this with certain families? And we say, you can't fit a square peg in a round hole.
Right.
There is no family that we've met that's like any other family.
Right.
Every family's different, and every family has dynamics. And people say all the time, gosh, I bet you've never seen this before, or my family's just the craziest. I'm like, no, you have no, everybody's is. Our family is. So, it's not being shocked by anything and not treating people different, because normal is not normal.
Right.
So that's very important to me, is to try to treat everyone the same. And,
Right.
and give everybody the same.
Right.
So, and we try to work with everybody. If people have different situations, we're very open to tell us what you need or how can we help you get through this process, because they deserve that. Everybody
Right.
deserves that. So,
Well, I guess that brings me to my next question. What types of services do you guys offer, or because I know it's nobody knows when. I mean, because death, we all expect death to happen. Sometimes it can be unexpected, though. So, what is the process that you go through with helping people plan?
I'll let you, since I've talked the whole time.
She's so much better at it than me. So, I mean, that really, there's not a black and white answer. I mean, we really do whatever the family needs us to do.
Right.
So that could start as early as pre-planning. Some folks come in and they just literally have been through the process at one point or another in their lives, and they know the stress and the responsibility it takes to make funeral arrangements, and they want to make it easier for their family that they're leaving behind. Some families come in and they have a loved one that's fighting cancer or battling a long illness, and so they're anticipating and they're trying to prepare. And,
Right.
there's a lot of different situations, but the pre-planning, you can essentially do as much ahead of time as you can at the time, and all that takes place is that then you're making all those decisions when you have a level head, less
Right.
stress, not as much going on, and you can get things a little bit better prepared in a less time restrictive manner that way.
Right.
But even if someone doesn't pre-plan, at the time of a passing, then we're going to do whatever we need to help the family taking their loved one into our care, providing whatever level of care that they need us to. Some families prefer burial, some families prefer cremation. I try to really emphasize that that's really just one decision, bigger picture.
Right.
But ultimately, what we've seen in our experience is just the first step of closure is having an opportunity to gather as family and friends. And, it's not uncommon for families to come in and be a little reluctant to allow folks to gather that haven't been there over the last year or two and so forth. But, when we look back at our lives, I have plenty of really close friends that I don't see as often as I'd like.
Right.
But the moment we get back together, we pick back up where we left off, and there are memories that I can't just take away from my past. And so having an opportunity to let your community, your church family, your extended family, your neighborhood, your friends come together and share memories about your dad, your mom, your siblings, so on and so forth, or just come and give you a hug and show you that they love you and that they're thinking about you and that you're not alone in the whole process.
Right.
That's where we see is the gathering and the opportunity to memorialize or pay tribute to someone's life is a really major big step in that first process of
Right.
closure and
Right.
healing and grieving in general.
Right.
We
But-
say all the time, let me cut you off. We say all the time, or I do, the most nerve-wracking moment of when a family comes in, there's two times. And it's when they walk in the door to make arrangements, and the second time is when they're walking in the door for the visitation.
Right.
Because it's the first time they're going to see their loved one. And you can just see the anxiety in them. And the funeral home is very solemn during that time. It's very quiet. You can feel their sorrow. But then the second we open the doors for the public visitation, there's just this lightness in the air. People come through, you hear laughter, you hear kids screaming. And I think that shows a lot about the healing that comes through hearing stories. Like if your dad passes away and his friend came through the line and gets to tell you, well, your dad showed me your picture every single day as you were growing up. There's things that you may not know about your loved one, and there's so much healing in that. And so I always tell that story because I do think it shows the importance of gathering, whether it's at the funeral home or a restaurant or a church, or it doesn't matter where. We don't care where. We just try to direct families that is important.
Right.
And to see your loved one last time is very important. So we try to direct them on what we think is going to give them the best healing.
Right.
So,
I have a question.
Yep.
So with the pre-planning, I know typically in most cases, your job starts when you go and pick up most time, right? Pre-planning wise, I know it's not really. What would you say is a good age to start doing that? And I know that that's not.
Yeah.
Obviously, I probably know the answer to that, but some people might not. When would you recommend people to start pre-planning? And when they're pre-planning, is there, like, for instance, if they don't have life insurance, is this an opportunity for them to make payments on their plan before something should happen? How does that work financially for someone who maybe doesn't have life insurance policies and things like that?
That's a loaded question.
I know. It's a lot of questions in one question.
Yeah, right? You know, the one thing, pre-planning can be as much or as little as you want it to be. You can do the entire process. You can go through all the information. You can pick out what type of services and caskets and burial vaults or urns you want. Who's going to officiate, who's going to be pallbearers, what you're going to wear. I mean, you can do as much or as little as you want, and funding goes into that same exact boat. You don't have to fund if you're pre-planning. What helps when you pre-plan is you understand we're going to give you an idea of what an estimate of what the funeral costs, and then from that point, we'll talk to you about different options, and you can decide what's best for you. If that's saving up and knowing that you want to pay it off in 10 years, there's different avenues to do that, whether it's multi-payment options or whether it's just you saving and then paying, or whether you have existing insurance or so on and so forth. So to answer your question, the payment is a big relief to the family that's left behind.
Right.
But even some of the easy biographical questions that we ask, like your social security number, I mean, I don't fault anyone. It's not uncommon. I don't know my parents' social security numbers. If you put me on the spot, I really don't know where I'd find them.
Right.
You know, if someone's prior military, they're entitled to certain benefits from the VA, but they have to have an honorable discharge to do that. Well, does somebody know where your discharge is?
Most families, we say that, and they say, I have no idea where that would be. And we're like, there's so many little questions that on a normal day, if we asked you, you wouldn't stumble. But you've got to remember, a lot of these people have not slept. They're in shock. They're grieving. And to ask them these questions at the time, they've already got so much on their plate. And then you're asking me to find an honorable discharge? Like, how am I going to do that in 24 hours? So that's a big advantage to pre-planning.
And when we file with this, we have to notify the state. We notify Social Security for families so they don't have to do that. We order death certificates for them. And the state always asks.
And that's a huge relief for families. I know dealing with that recently.
Yeah.
Not having to reach out and go through all the hoopla you have to do.
Sitting on the phone.
Multiple copies, and they have to be done a certain way.
Yeah.
That's a huge relief.
And they ask some questions that we don't think about, like what was the decedent's highest level of education? You know, did mom graduate high school or did she drop out? You know, back in a lot of our grandparents' age or folks in the 70s and up, I mean, it might have been 8th grade and they were done, you know. And so those aren't major questions if you don't know the answer to, but those are questions that if someone's pre-planning, they're super easy to find out and confirm ahead of time versus 24 hours after someone passes. So
we laugh. We tell everybody, just put it somewhere. Obviously, if you come to the funeral home, we'll keep it forever. You know, we have protected cabinets in the computer. He gets mad at me because my funeral plan is my Bible.
Right.
And it's on my favorite passage. And he gets so mad at me. But I'm like, when I die, I want you to have to go through my Bible and read my passage, and then it's all in there.
Right.
And so on Sunday morning, for some reason in church is when I think the most about it. And I'm like scribbling, no, I don't want to do that anymore, and I want to add it. And it's like chicken scratch all over my Bible. But it makes him so angry because he's like, just put it on paper and put it at the funeral home. But that's not what I want to do. I want him to have to go through my Bible and read it.
As a funeral director speaking, not as her husband, but as a funeral director speaking, for those that are familiar with the Bible, there are a lot of pages in the Bible, and it's not a great place to make your pre-plans.
Not to hide it, right?
Yeah. It shouldn't be a scavenger hunt. It should be very easy.
I'm gonna
and
keep
neat.
it interesting after I leave.
But I don't have a perfect age for you. Some folks go through health issues earlier in life than others. If
I like
you
the thought of knowing that they can at a young age if they want.
Mhm.
Young, I say like 30,
Yeah.
35-ish. That's a good, like in my mind, that's a great time to start thinking about.
so
And having, like just being able to know that you can prepay on that if you don't
Yeah.
want to leave that for someone, because that is a huge stress to some people to just think that they have to leave that behind
Right.
for someone else to deal with.
yeah, and that's I laugh because we joined offices a couple months back, and she opened up a drawer, and I did put my
did it the right way.
information together, so it's all there for her. And I think it caught her off guard a little bit because it's a little bit morbid, but it's not going to expedite the process. Because I filled out my information doesn't mean that I'm going to die at a younger age. It just means that I've hopefully made it a little bit simpler for her. And pre-plans are plans. Like, they can be adjusted and updated, and what you do today doesn't mean that's going to be the end. You can reevaluate just like you would your estate every 5 to 10 years, you know. Again, it can be as much or as little as you want to do, but
And
but
to
the
that,
age should be the whole goal of pre-planning is to make it easier on the ones you leave behind. So, you know, if you start having kids that become of age to make decisions, you know, if Jen and I were together in a car accident or something, that, you know, who's going to know the information?
For
Yeah.
somebody else.
And to that, about planning, a lot of times people will come in and say, well, Dad didn't want anything, and he doesn't want anything, and people feel as if they've got to follow their dad's wishes because that's what Dad said. And absolutely, if that's what's the most important to you, we do that. But at that point, it's not about them anymore. It's about who's left behind and what you need.
Right.
He is gone, and hopefully his spirit is in heaven, but he is gone at that point. So even though you may have a family member that tells you all the time exactly what they want, if at the end of the day when they pass away, if it is grieving you and if it is eating you alive that you're not going to get to have a celebration or hear stories, make sure that you make it about your family because you're the one left here without them. You're the one having to grieve without them. So even when you're planning your own funeral, think about your family that's left behind. And I know a lot of people say, well, you know, I don't want them to have to see me. They don't want to deal with anything. I don't want to have to put them through that. It's not putting them through something bad. It's actually helping them when they grieve. So I tell that to a lot of people. It's not about you when you pass away. It's about your family.
Right.
So that's something important to think about when you're planning.
It's a fairly common statement. You probably have heard where people say funerals and celebrations of life, they're for the living. And sometimes that can be forgotten, especially if you love your family and you're trying to make things simple for them and you think simpler is better. You know, really, if you're looking out for the family, you want to make sure that they have the best opportunity to go through that grieving process because it's inevitable. Everybody goes through it. Everybody goes through it at different paces, in different ways. You know, it's just something. The whole goal is to pay tribute to the one that's lost and allow those that are still surviving to have a proper way to tribute
We've
them.
seen so many times when a family chooses not to have anything, and a lot of that is because that's what that person wanted.
Right.
They'll come back to us and say, when can I laugh again? Or when is it okay that I go to the movies? Or when is it okay that I go to a party? We've not stopped and had that moment, so I feel like I can't move on. Right. There's this weird, they can't transition out of the death.
Right.
Where when you have something, even if it's a gathering at your house, you stop, you pause, you pay honor to that person, and then you go on to the next chapter. But if you don't have anything, you're always stuck in this
limbo.
Yeah, you're in limbo. And so we've heard that so many times from people, and you know, that's where we try to direct and tell them, have something, even if it's go to the cemetery as your family, you know, anything.
And I know that's something my wife and I, we talk about, of course, as we're getting older. You know, we talk more about, you know, the pre-planning and how we want our funeral to go. And of course, anybody who knows my wife, she says, I just want a big party. You know, she goes, I just want a party. I don't want anybody to be sad. And you know, and it's like I tell her, I don't want anybody to make a big to-do about me. Just you know, I'm gone. You know, it's, you know, part of life.
Right.
And but I think it's that way with a lot of people. You know, you don't. we're going to mourn them when they're gone, and we're going to be sad, but it's also a happy time, really.
I think specifically about one incident, and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. You guys held a celebration for someone, and she had planned everything, literally to a T, like all the way down to who was going to speak, and it was not an option. They were to be there. And at one point in the middle of the service, there was so much laughing coming from the room in the middle of the service that I believe I saw you at the door, like checking to make sure everything was okay, because it was like, I mean, we were like belly laughing hard. And I noticed that through that process, you guys were so, not even just empathetic. You were just there. You were present. And I think that was the most important thing for that family, and it truly helped them that it was already set in stone. Everything was ready to go, and they didn't have to make any decisions. It was already there, and that service was probably the most incredible service I've ever witnessed.
Well, honestly, it's an honor to be there for families, especially families like that. She was very headstrong. She knew what she wanted. And it's not easy to go through that pre-planning with that person, especially when you're friends with them. But to see it on the other side, to get to tell the family things that she had told me that she wanted them to know, there's so much healing in that. And unfortunately, we can't be there for every family. We have our own family that we have to go home to at night. And that's always hard. We can't physically be in front of every single family. We try really hard to be, but there's things that come up and we can't. But that's where we give it to our staff. We have a great family at Morgan's. We have funeral directors Candace Burkeen and Chase Mitchell and Glenda Joyce and Rick Still. They are great with families, and if you know any of them, we try to find people that compassion and empathy are natural, because you can't teach those things. You can teach how to file a death certificate and park a car, but we really try to look for people that put themselves in those family shoes. So if we're not there, one of them are, and they're very good. They're very compassionate about what they do. So
I know it's tough, and I know there was something that you wanted to touch on.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, this year, we normally try to do a holiday service of remembrance for every family in Caldwell and Lyon County. And what that is just right before Thanksgiving. We normally have it at Ogden, and it's a night where you can give photos of your loved one, no matter what year and where they passed away. And we have a service talking about how to get through the holidays when you're grieving. And it's a really beautiful service. We have a candlelight service and normally a gift. We obviously were not able to do it last year because of COVID. And this year we've really struggled with whether we were going to do it or not. And it takes a lot of planning between advertising and getting everything ready, that our deadline to make the decision about it was September. And if you remember, in September, our COVID numbers were spiking. So at that time, we decided, you know what, let's play it safe one more year. It would be horrible if we brought all these people in for the service and we had a COVID outbreak, which is, how COVID is, but we're having funerals still, so how does that work? We just had to make the best decision for the people. So we decided to, this year, because of COVID, to not do the holiday service of remembrance again this year. But what we are going to do is any loved one that was in our care this past year at Morgan's or Lakeland, we've videoed pretty much like a pre-videoed memorial service. And it's got video, it's got tips, it's got music, and it just talks about things that from our grief counselor that we know, things to go ahead and get ahead of during the holidays. Because everyone's sad during the holidays. You feel like you should be happy, but you're missing somebody, and it's this big struggle. So we're going to send a DVD out to every family that we've served, and it's got this beautiful service on it. And inside of it, if you don't use DVDs, because we don't have a DVD player at home, we put a QR code in there for people that are younger and want to use their phone. But we're also going to hand those out at the funeral home for anybody that wants one. And we have a candle during the holidays that sits in the funeral home, and it's always lit, and it's in honor of anyone that's lost someone. And we're going to have a memory board set out next to it this year. And if anybody wants to come and bring a picture of their loved one, doesn't matter when or where, they can come do that just in honor of their loved one. But we just thought this year, just play it safe, especially during September, because the numbers have been spiking. But we're truly hoping to get it going again next year, because it's a really beautiful service. So
I know COVID, gosh, it's still affecting so much.
It is.
And I guess that was probably pretty tough time, I guess, at the funeral home, wasn't it? Were you still able to do as you've been doing?
No, there for a while we weren't.
We've been through a lot of ups and downs as far as regulations at the funeral home. We're finally to a point this year where we haven't had regulations on us, so that's been a plus. But
The balloons were such an awesome idea.
Yeah, it was a crazy idea. My mom's best friend had just lost her husband, and my mom was, if you know her, she's very creative and she's like the boss.
Right.
I mean, and she
So that's where you get it from.
she's boss lady. It's crazy. She was like, how do we honor people that can't be there? People want to be there, but they can't be there because it was horrible. I'm an affectionate person, and so to stand there 6 feet from somebody and say, I'm so sorry you lost your wife, and you can't touch them or hug them, it felt
Right.
so disingenuous. So she said, how can we represent people that want to be there but physically can't be there? So her and her girlfriend stayed up who had just lost her husband, and they talked all night, and they were talking about all these ideas, and they first thought about a carnation, but the carnation didn't give the presence of a body. And so they came up with this balloon idea. If you fill the chapel with balloons, it'll represent people. And what's so cool about the idea is it's literally gone to Europe.
Really?
Yeah, it has gone all over the world, Hugs from Home. And it was on CNN or some big outlet. And it's funny because she's never gotten credit for
Yeah.
it. It's like all these other people in Europe. It was their grand idea of Hugs from
Right.
Home. And it wasn't. It was my mom and her best friend who just lost her husband one night just trying to come up with the idea. But that's not what it's about anyways.
Right.
It's about,
It was such a great idea.
yeah, about that family doesn't get to have their best friend here. How do we represent that? So we still are doing Hugs from Home. Not as many people are doing it. We do want to recommend still use our local florist. We do know at that time, Hugs from Home, people were doing that and not sending flowers because at the time, florists weren't able to bring them in. But our florists,
I'm getting flowers.
right, our florists are able to bring flowers now. So definitely use our local florist.
So what florists do we have? I know of 2, maybe?
yes, to the best of my knowledge,
With Treasure
we've
Remembered.
got Treasures Remembered and
and
Blooms by the Brook.
and,
Yeah, and they're both great.
The Blossom Shop still open?
Unfortunately, Robbie had sent me a text, I believe it was earlier this year, amidst COVID, that he was going to be closing his doors.
I know it's been a hard time for them getting
Yeah.
flowers and things
Yeah.
that they needed. So I was
So.
curious.
yeah.
It's good to know. Some people probably only thought we just still have one. So
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have good options here in town, and they do a really beautiful job, both of them. So,
Well, guys,
I think if there's any other questions.
I could talk all day if you
Yeah.
wanted me to, but I got groceries in the back of the car.
She done went grocery shopping this morning.
But guys, we certainly want to thank you guys for coming in this
Thank
morning.
you very much.
And just everything that we've talked about. And of course, if you guys have any questions, I know this video will be up. So just leave any comments or questions in the comment section below. And we'll be having this video later. Will be on our YouTube channel, Wainer TV. So
Have information if people want to stop in and get information.
Yeah.
For pre-planning.
We've got folders ready just to hand out
Just
if
so
they
they
want
can
to,
read up
if
on
they
it.
just kind of want to look into different options or what goes into pre-planning.
And then you can always call us. It's 270-365-5595, or you can email us at info at Morgan's Funeral Home. Or if you have a specific question about prearranging, we have an email address. It's preneed, PRENEED at morgansfuneralhome.com. And Cindy Hamby is our pre-need advisor there on staff, and she's wonderful. She can answer any questions you have. But or our website or Facebook. Or,
Stop in and get some information
Yeah.
about that too.
One thing, we always love a phone call ahead, but we're accustomed to people walking in. They're just in the mood at that moment to come in and talk, and we can do that anytime. But there's a lot of folks that may be a little bit timid to put it out there that they're looking at pre-planning, and our website has a lot of really good information on pre-arranging and what different options there are. There's actually a link on the website where you can go through a lot of the basic biographical information and start just
People
at
that may not
home.
wanna step foot in
right.
That just
Which
want
a lot
to
of
start
people
at home
don't.
and get some basic information set out. So,
Great
just
information.
another option.
But we'll tag Morgan's in this video and have all of this information in the bio.
be
That
great.
way, if anybody has any questions, they can comment you guys.
That'd be great.
But guys, thank you guys for joining us this morning. Jenna and Brian, thank you for coming in.
Yes,
and,
thank you
Thanks
very
for
much.
having us.
doing this with us this morning.
appreciate it.
So guys, we'll see you next week.